Autumn, year of dairy products from the American heartland. Drug addicts, driven to crime to finance their drug addiction, are not often inclined toward violent crime. Violence requires all different kinds of energy, and most drug addicts like to expend their energy not on their professional crime, but on what their professional crime lets them afford. Drug addicts are often burglars, therefore. One reason why the home of someone whose home has been burglarized feels violated and unclean is that there have probably been drug addicts in there. Don Gately was a 27-year-old oral narcotics addict, favoring Demerol and Tolwyn.
12.
Note 12. Meperidine hydrochloride and pentazocine hydrochloride, Schedule C-Roman numeral 2 and C-Roman numeral 4, are narcotic analgesics, respectively, both from the good folks over at Sanofi Winthrop Farm Labs, Incorporated. Subnote A. Following the Continental Controlled Substance Act of Year of the Tux Medicated Pad, ONAN's DEA's hierarchy of analgesics / antipyretics / anxiolytics establishes drug classes of category Roman numeral 2 through category Roman numeral 4, with C2s, example, Dilaudid and Demerol, being judged the heaviest with regard to dependence and possible abuse, down to C-4s that are about as potent as a kiss on the forehead from mom. And that's a good reference from White Rabbit, if you know what I'm talking about. End of note 12.
And a more or less professional burglar. And he was, himself, unclean and violated. But he was a gifted burglar when he burgled, though the size of a young dinosaur, with a massive and almost perfectly square head he used to amuse his friends when drunk by letting them open and close elevator doors on. He was, at his professional zenith, smart, sneaky, quiet, quick, possessed of good taste and reliable transportation, with a kind of ferocious jolliness in his attitude toward his livelihood. As an active drug addict, Gately was distinguished by his ferocious and jolly elan. He kept his big square chin up and his smile wide, but he bowed neither toward nor away from any man. He took zero in the way of shit, and was a cheery but implacable exponent of the don't get mad, get even school. Like, for instance, once, after he'd done a really unpleasant 3-month bit in Revere Holding on nothing more than a remorseless North Shore assistant district attorney's circumstantial suspicion, finally getting out after 92 days when his PD got the charges dismissed on a right-to-speedy brief, Gately and a trusted associate paid a semi-professional visit to the private home of this assistant DA, whose zeal and warrant had cost Gately a nasty impromptu detox on the floor of his little holding cell.
13.
Note 13. Though masked in the evidentiary photo and never once given up or named by Gately to anyone, this can be presumed to have been one Trent, quote, Quo Vadis, Kite, Gately's old and once gifted friend from his Beverly, Massachusetts childhood. End of note 13.
Also a believer in the revenge is tastier chilled dictum, Gately had waited patiently until the Eye on People section of the Globe mentioned the ADA and his wife's presence at some celebrity charity sailing thing out in Marblehead. Gately and the associate went that night to the ADA's private home in the upscale Wonderland Valley section of Revere, killed the power to the home with a straight shunt in the meter's inflow, then clipped just the ground wire on the home's pricey HBT alarm, so that the alarm would sound after 10 or so minutes and create the impression that the perps had somehow bungled the alarm and been scared off in the middle of the act. Later that night, when Revere's and Marblehead's finest summoned them home, the ADA and his wife found themselves minus a coin collection and 2 antique shotguns and nothing more. Quite a few other valuables were stacked on the floor of the living room off the foyer, like the perps hadn't had time to get them out of the house. Everything else in the burglarized home looked undisturbed. The ADA was a jaded pro. He walked around touching the brim of his hat and reconstructed probable events.
14.
Note 14. This ADA's little personal trademark was that he always wore an anachronistic but quality Stetson brand businessman's hat with a decorative feather in the band, and frequently touched or played with the hat in tense situations. End of note 14.
The perps looked like they'd bungled disabling the alarm all the way, and had got scared off by the thing's siren when the alarm's pricey HBT alternate ground kicked in at 300 volts. The ADA soothed his wife's sense of violation and uncleanliness. He calmly insisted on sleeping there in their home that very night. No hotel. It was like crucial to get right back on the emotional horse in cases like this, he insisted. And then the next day the ADA worked out the insurance and reported the shotguns to a buddy at ATF, and his wife calmed down, and life went on.
15.
Note 15. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, at that time under the temporary aegis of the United States Office of Unspecified Services. End of note 15.
About a month later, an envelope arrived in the ADA's home's exquisite wrought iron mailbox. In the envelope were a standard American Dental Association glossy brochure on the importance of daily oral hygiene, available at like any dentist's office anywhere, and 2 high-pixel Polaroid snapshots, one of Big Don Gately and one of his associate, each in a Halloween mask denoting a clown's great good professional cheer, each with his pants down and bent over, and each with the enhanced focus handle of one of the couple's toothbrushes protruding from his bottom. Don Gately had sense enough never to work the North Shore again after that, but he ended up in hideous trouble anyway, ADA-wise. It was either bad luck or kismet or so forth. It was because of a cold, a plain old human rhinovirus, and not even Don Gately's cold is what made him finally stop and question his kismet. The thing started out looking like tit on a tray, burglary-wise. A beautiful neo-Georgian home in a wildly upscale part of Brookline was set nicely back from an unlit pseudo-rural road, had a chintzy Sentry Co. alarm system that fed, idiotically enough, on a whole separate 330-volt AC 90 Hz cable with its own meter. Didn't seem to be on anything like a regular PM patrol route, and had, at its rear, flimsily tasteful French doors, surrounded by dense and thorn-free, deciduous shrubbery, and blocked off from the garage's halogen floods by a private EWD issue, upscale dumpster. It was, in short, a real cocktease of a home, burglary-wise, for a drug addict. And Don Gately straight shunted the alarms meter and, with an associate, broke and entered and crept around on huge cat feet.
16.
Note 16. Extremely unpleasant Quebecois insurgents and cartridge-related subsequent developments make it clear that this was again Trent Quo Vadis Kite. End of note 16.
Except, unfortunately, the owner of the house turned out to be still home, even though both of his cars and the rest of his family were gone. The little guy was asleep, sick in bed upstairs, in acetate pajamas, with a hot water bottle on his chest, and half a glass of OJ, and a bottle of NyQuil, and a foreign book and copies of International Affairs and interdependent affairs, and a pair of thick specs, and an industrial-size box of Kleenex on the bedside table, and an empty vaporizer barely humming at the foot of the bed. And the guy was, to say the least, nonplussed to wake up and see high-filter flashlights crisscrossing over the unlit bedroom walls and bureau, antique chiffonier, as Gately and Associates scanned for a wall safe, which, surprisingly, like 90% of people with wall safes, conceal in their master bedroom behind some sort of land or seascape painting.
17.
Note 17. The coding less kind, though. Almost the first physical datum Gately took in the nasty flashbulb flash shock of the occupied bedroom's light coming on. To give you an idea of an oral narcotics man's depth of psychic investment. End of note 17.
People turned out so identical in certain root domestic particulars it made Gately feel strange sometimes, like he was in possession of certain overlarge private facts to which no man should be entitled. Gately had a way stickier conscience about the possession of some of these large particular facts than he did about making off with other people's personal merchandise. But then, all of a sudden, in mid-silent search for a safe, here's this upscale homeowner turning out to be home with a nasty head cold, while his family's out on a 2-car foliage tour in what's left of the Berkshires, writhing groggily and nyquilized around on the bed and making honking adenoidal sounds and asking what in bloody hell is the meaning of this, except he's saying it in Quebecois French, which means to these thuggish U.S. drug addicts in Halloween clowns' masks exactly nothing. He's sitting up in bed, a little and older type homeowner with a football-shaped head and gray Van Dyke and eyes you can tell are used to corrective lenses as he switches on the bright bedside lamp. Gately could easily have screwed out of there and never looked back. But here indeed, in the lamplight, is a seascape over next to the chiffonier, and the associate has a quick peek and reports that the safe behind it is to laugh at. It can be opened with harsh language, almost. And oral narcotics addicts tend to operate on an extremely rigid physical schedule of need and satisfaction, and Gately is at this moment firmly in the need part of the schedule. And so, D.W. Gately, disastrously, decides to go ahead and allow a non-violent burglary to become, in effect, a robbery, which the operative legal difference involves either violence or the coercive threat of same. And Gately draws himself up to his full menacing height and shines his flashlight in the little homeowner's roomy eyes and addresses him the way menacing criminals speak in popular entertainment. D's for TH's, various apocopes, and so on, and takes hold of the guy's ear and conducts him down to a kitchen chair and binds his arms and legs to the chair with electrical cords neatly clipped from refrigerator and can opener and M. Cafe brand automatic cafe au lait maker. Binds him just short of gangrenously tight, because he's hoping the Berkshire foliage is prime, and the guy is going to be soloing in this chair for a good stretch of time, and Gately starts looking through the kitchen drawers for the silverware. Not the good silver for company silverware. That was in a calfskin case underneath some neatly folded old spare Christmas wrapping, in a stunning hardwood with ivory inlaid chest of drawers in the living room, where over 90% of upscale people's good silver is always hidden, and has already been promoted and is piled just off the foyer.
18.
Note 18. On top of the seascape safe's more negotiable contents, themselves on top of an unplugged and head-parked and absolutely top-hole genuine interlace state-of-the-art TP viewer ensemble, and a multi-shelved hardwood rollable-like entertainment systems console thing with a cartridge dock and double head drive and a compartment underneath with doors with Class C little brass maple leaf knob things and several shelves crammed tight with upscale, arty-looking film cartridges, which latter Don Gately's colleague just about drooled all over the parquet flooring at the potential discriminating type fence value of potentially, if they were rare of celluloid transferred or not available on the interlace dissemination grid. End of note 18.
But just the regular old everyday flatware silverware, because the vast bulk of homeowners keep their dish towels 2 drawers below their everyday silverware drawer. And God's made no better call for help stifling gag in the world than a good old, oily smelling, fake linen dish towel. And the bound guy in the cords on the chair suddenly snaps to the implications of what Gately's looking for, and is struggling and saying, "Do not gag me. I have a terrible cold. My nose, she is a brick of the snot. I have not the power to breathe through the nose. For the love of God, please do not gag my mouth." And as a gesture of goodwill, the homeowner tells Gately, who's rummaging, the combination of the bedroom's seascape safe, except in French numbers, which, together with the honking adenoidal inflection the guy's grip gives his speech, doesn't even sound like human speech to Gately. But also, the guy tells Gately, there are some antique, pre-British takeover, Quebecois gold coins in a calfskin purse taped to the back of an undistinguished impressionist landscape in the living room. But everything the Canadian homeowner says means no more to poor old Don Gately, whistling a jolly tune and trying to look menacing in his clown's mask, than the cries of, say, North Shore gulls or inland grackles. And sure enough, the towels are 2 drawers under the spoons. And here comes Gately across the kitchen looking like a sort of bozo from hell, and the Quebecer guy's mouth goes oval with horror, and into that mouth goes a balled-up, faintly greasy-smelling kitchen towel, and across the guy's cheeks and over the dome of protruding linen goes some fine-quality fibrous strapping tape from the drawer under the decommissioned phone. Why does everybody keep the serious mailing supplies in the drawer nearest the kitchen phone? And Don Gately and associate finish their swift, and with the best of intentions, non-violent business of stripping the Brookline home as bare as a post-feral hamster meadow. And they relock the front door and hit the unlit road in Gately's reliable and double-mufflered 4x4. And the bound, wheezing, acetate-clad Canadian, the right-hand man to probably the most infamous anti-ONAN organizer north of the Great Concavity, the lieutenant and troubleshooting trusted advisor who selflessly volunteered to move with his family to the savagely American area of Metro Boston, to act as liaison between and general leash holder for the half-dozen or so malevolent and mutually antagonistic groups of Quebecer separatists and Albertan ultra-rightists, united only in their fanatical conviction that the USA's ex-imperialistic gift or return of the so-called reconfigured Great Convexity to its northern neighbor and ONAN ally constituted an intolerable blow to Canadian sovereignty, honor, and hygiene. This homeowner, unquestionably a VIP, although admittedly rather a covert VIP, or probably more accurately a PIT in French.
19.
Note 19. Une personne de l'importance terrible. Presumably. End of note 19.
This meek-looking Canadian terrorism coordinator, bound to his chair, thoroughly gagged, sitting there, alone, under cold, fluorescent kitchen lights.
20.
Note 20. Fluorescence has been banned in Quebec, as have computerized telephone solicitations, the little ad cards that fall out of magazines and have to be looked at to be picked up and thrown in the trash. And the mention of any religious holiday whatsoever to sell any sort of product or service is just one reason why his volunteering to come live down here was selfless. End of note 20.
The rhino virally afflicted man, gagged with skill and quality materials. The guy, having worked so hard to partially clear one clotted nasal passage that he tore intercostal ligaments in his ribs, soon found even that pinprick of air blocked off by mucus's implacable lava-like flow once again, and so has to tear more ligaments trying to breach the other nostril, and so on, And after an hour of struggle and flames in his chest and blood on his lips and the white kitchen towel from trying frantically to tongue the towel out past the tape, which is quality tape, and after hopes skyrocketing when the doorbell rings, and then hopes blackly dashed when the person at the door, a young woman with a clipboard and chewing gum who's offering promotional coupons good for Happy Holidays discounts on memberships of 6 months or more at a string of Boston non-UV tanning salons, shrugs in her parka and makes a mark on the clipboard and blithely retreats down the long driveway to the pseudo-rural road. An hour of this or more, finally, the Quebecois PIT, after unspeakable agony, slow suffocation, mucoidal or no, being no day at the Montreal Tulip Fest, at the height of which agony, hearing his head's pulse as receding thunder, and watching his vision circle shrink as a red aperture around his sight rotates steadily in from the edges, at the height of which he could think only, despite the pain and panic, of what a truly dumb and silly way this was, after all this time, to die. A thought which the towel and tape denied expression via the rueful grin with which the best men meet the dumbest ends. This Guillaume de Plessis passed bluely from this life, and sat there in the kitchen chair, 250 clicks due east of some really spectacular autumn foliage, for almost 2 nights and days, his posture getting more and more military as rigor mortis set in, with his bare feet looking like purple loaves of bread from the Leviticity. And when Brookline's finest are finally summoned and got him unbound from the coldly lit chair, they had to carry him out as if he were still seated. So, militarily, Camille Faux had his limbs and spine hardened. And poor old Don Gately, whose professional habit of killing power with straight shunts to a meter's inflow was pretty much a signature M.O., and who had, of course, a special place in the heart of a remorseless revere with judicial clout throughout Boston's 3 counties and beyond, and of course particularly remorseless ADA as of late, whose wife now needed Valium even just to floss, and was patiently awaiting his chance, the ADA was, coldly biding his time, being a patient get-even and cold dish man just like Don Gately, who was, for no will to energy-consuming violence on his part, in the sort of a hell of a deep shit mess that can turn a man's life right around.